And we're back. The final installment of the CLINK, episode 5. Now, we left off with a discussion about rats, horrific conditions of confinement, and a combination of both. So we're going to pick up here with the Rat Man. I'm calling him the Rat Man. I don't know his name. Maybe it's Nigel. Yeah. Okay. So we're not going to call him the Rat Man because he has a name. His name is Nigel. And I'm not sure why Nigel was confined to the CLINK, but what we do know is that he has lots of rats. And according to some of the accompanying literature, namely the brochure, he was friendly with the rats. And Nigel would oftentimes teach the rats to do little things and so on and so forth, and he had access to crumbs of bread and so on and so forth. But the point that I'm trying to make is that prisoners at the CLINK and elsewhere are oftentimes subjected to really horrific conditions where disease is a particular problem. Custodians of prisons have the legal responsibility to see to it that prisoners, upon release, are not any worse off health-wise than when they entered. In the 1970s, there was a lot of legal activity in the courts, out of Texas in particular, in which prisoners were suing the state of Texas for what they claimed were violations of the 8th Amendment, ban on cruel or unusual punishment, with respect to health care. And they argued that health care, or the violation of providing health care, was cruel and unusual punishment. So I'm just offering a little bit more contemporary context to horrific conditions of confinement. Let us move on to Nigel's quarters. And there you go. It's the honeymoon suite. You're probably saying, there's a lot of apartments off campus in New Brunswick that could rival that. And Nigel obviously would retire here. And you see the chain, which would imply that the warders, the guards, might very well have him shackled while he was asleep. Comfy, huh? Let's move along. All right. How's that? The chopping block. Yeah. There's a lot of historical significance for the chopping block. The removal of the head, decapitation, so on and so forth. But let's look at the instructional poster for some historical significance. The execution block. Beheading was normally reserved for those of high rank. In England, a block and axe was the common method, but in France and Germany, the head was taken off with the swing of a sword. This was the method requested by Anne Boleyn, one of the many wives of Henry VIII. And an expert swordsman had been brought in from France to perform the task. It was believed that by dying by the axe was seen as an honorable death and was regarded as the same as dying in battle. Females were normally refused this form of execution with the belief that they were not worthy enough to die a soldier's death. Women generally face the gallows, which is hanging. Now, a couple things are worth noting with respect to social stratification, and that is a fancy word to describe how society is broken down into categories. Men, women, for example. So here you have Anne Boleyn as a woman is allowed to breach the tradition of only men would be subject to the execution block. The other social stratification worth noting in English society is between the upper class and the lower classes. The posh of the upper classes and the working poor of the lower classes. And this is deeply ingrained in English society, especially at this time of the CLINK. And the poor people were very much vulnerable to being tossed in the CLINK by the debtors who had financial power, economic whereabouts, to render certain people to the prison, to the CLINK. English society is still very class-based. You could make that argument about the U.S. However, compared to traditional English society, the class-based stratification